What's up, MetaNerdz? This video will get you ready for the new Kenobi show, understanding where it is on the timeline, what can and cannot happen, who we could see, who we're likely to see, where all the different organizations across the galaxy are at their point in development, their motivations, and just to have an overall reference point and context for everything you might see. But first I want to thank this video's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is not a crisis line, but nor is it fluffy self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, a modern solution to barriers that have been with therapy since its inception. Now you can cut out all the transit time and rigid schedules of a physical office, using their app to connect you to their network of 20,000 licensed therapists from all over the globe. It is cheaper and more convenient, and you can start communicating in as little as 48 hours, with sessions being done through video calls, just normal phone calls, or even through text messages. Whichever you prefer, and you will be able to find a therapist that specializes in the particular issues you want to work on, all on a much more flexible schedule. And you can even send messages to your therapist at any time. And something that I did personally was I was able to change my therapist. It was really straightforward and simple. Again, all while being much more affordable than traditional methods, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants to make therapy as practical and straightforward as possible. Start living a happier life today, be proactive, and head down to the link in the description, where you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/metanerds. That's betterhelp.com/metanerds. So let's start with the most obvious, the year. It's 9 BBY, which stands for Before the Battle of Yavin, right in the midpoint between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, with the end of the Clone Wars and creation of Darth Vader in 19 BBY, and the destruction of the first Death Star making year 0. Kenobi would be 48 years old. And before we get into all the other characters and where they are, just know this will have some major spoilers for the Clone Wars and Rebel TV shows, which I highly recommend. More important than this video, seriously make sure you watch those. Best case you're like me and you've seen it all but you wanted a refresher and more context. I learned a lot in just making this video, and it was just a nice pause and refresher to just understand where the galaxy is at 9 BBY. One likely candidate to see is Quinlan Vos.
Well, that's your opinion, man.
Who we actually first saw in Mos Espa on Tatooine. He's one of the most unconventional Jedi, and had a friendly and effective relationship with Obi-Wan, even if the latter was always annoyed by Vos's disregard for protocol.
Kenobi, you look worse for wear. How's temple life?
All in the council knew he had a grittier side, and this did help him in deep undercover investigations. He was actually on Tatooine to work with the meager police force there and gather intel on organized crime syndicates, which dominated the Hutt-ran world. During the war, he was involved in one of the most morally questionable assignments, faking a fall to the dark side in order to join Ventress in her aims of assassinating her former Sith master. He would actually fall to the dark side for a period, and of course wasn't successful in killing Dooku to end the war. That novel is great, but just to answer the other question this might have raised, Ventress will not be joining us, at least not in bodily form, but Vos was confirmed even in the new canon to be one of the Order 66 survivors, and was a top priority on the list of the Grand Inquisitor. This, with his familiarity with Tatooine, working his whole life in the underworld, being a target of the Imps, and the fact that he worked with Kenobi, would all make for a perfect fit, and a chance to show character growth from the happy-go-lucky, rebellious Jedi, to a somber and serious Order 66 survivor. In the canon Darth Vader from 2019, we get a glimpse at a list of Order 66 survivors being hunted by the Inquisitorius. And though we only see a few names here on this holo, one of the craziest is Coleman Kaj. This guy, one of the Ungry species, one of the strangest species in all of Star Wars. And the same could be said for Oppo Rancis. Both have been done in live action before and would be a crazy obscure reference, but they did go out of their way to confirm it in canon, so we'll see. And the other names here on the list are Yoda and Kenobi, while these two names are just a reconfiguration of the author and artist of that comic. Grogu would be another survivor, but I doubt we would see him. He might pop up in some group hiding from the Inquisitors, maybe a glimpse of his hover carriage egg. But that's all I'd guess, as they don't want to make everything the Baby Yoda show. But another green baby we might see is Rotta. The Clone Wars show came after the Clone Wars animated movie, which focused on the Republic and Separatists trying to win over the Hutt cartel to their side, with Dooku kidnapping Jabba's son and framing it to look like the Jedi were behind it. Jabba nicknamed his son Piduki Mufkin, or Punky Muffin in basic. There appears to be a real loving bond here, and he's on Tatooine, with Kenobi being a major player in this mission to return him, but we've had zero additions to Rotta's story since then. Getting the Hutts to allow the Republic to use their independent space proved to be a major advantage in the Clone Wars, so it'd be interesting if saving Rotta again would earn Kenobi a sort of protected status by Jabba, ordering his thugs to leave the old hermit alone. Or perhaps Rotta, one who was saved by the Jedi, might be helping them to escape, and could give us a nice look at a Hutt good guy, using his underworld connections to fight the good fight. And from Hutt, I want to turn to a Hett. Asharad Hett is a great character who has yet to be mentioned in the new canon. He was also one of the most interesting survivors of Order 66, the Padawan of Ki-Adi-Mundi, who became a master and general during the Clone Wars. He was born on Tatooine and would live with the Tuskens and hide out here during the rise of the Empire. He would run into Kenobi in exile, get into a fierce lightsaber battle, and after fleeing his homeworld would turn to the dark side and take the name Darth Krayt, but not by kneeling to Darth Sidious. Instead, he fell from the direct influence of an ancient Sith spirit on Korriban. Anakin had told him about his slaughter of the Sand People, and Hett felt that he could have prevented the fall of the Order if he simply told the Council about his friend's darkest moment. So even if some of these details are altered, you could see a surprising arc in the new show where they aren't just hunting Jedi, but other competing dark side traditions and potential Sith rivals, as Sidious would want to have complete control over the Force in the galaxy. Famous Mandalorians like Din Djarin and Bo-Katan would be running around at this time, hiding out from the Empire as well after the fall of Mandalore somewhere around 19 BBY. So it would be many years after that, perhaps a whole decade by the time of the show. So Jedi and Mandos could find themselves unlikely allies in their shared fleeing from the Empire. And though Sabine Wren would only be 12 at this time, just 2 years before the show, Kanan Jarrus, aka Jedi survivor Caleb Dume, had just gotten involved with Hera Syndulla, the Twi'lek master pilot and early member of what would become the Rebel Alliance. While they wouldn't meet Ezra until 4 years later, in 5 BBY, Ahsoka had been working with Hera and the Rebellion for some time, even if only the top leadership like Bail Organa knew her true identity outside of her codename Fulcrum. So if you see this symbol, you know that Ahsoka is working behind the scenes, and we already saw the Morai birds that have become linked with Ahsoka appearances. But I doubt Kenobi would actually meet her, as he never references her survival that we know of, and was solely focused on Luke's survival and knew of Leia. But like the Ahsoka novel shows, she is both the target of the Inquisitors and actively trying to prevent their efforts. The Spectre's crew wouldn't even know her identity until years later, around the same time everyone found out that Darth Maul was still alive. In Rebels, a major plot point is Maul discovering that Kenobi is alive, and he puts insane effort into finding his location. And so while he cannot directly interact with Kenobi either, Maul would be very active at this time. The Solo movie takes place just 1 year before this Kenobi series, where we were left with the cliffhanger of Kira taking over Crimson Dawn, which was Maul's criminal empire that he had been crafting since the Clone Wars, bringing countless crime syndicates, big and small, all under his secret control. All with Kira as the face, who would continue to run the organization after Maul's death and into the time of the original trilogy. In Rogue One, Saw Gerrera got a live action, but he'd been around since the Clone Wars and grew increasingly violent in his approach by the time of Rebels.
Your people suffer while the leaders of this rebellion refuse to act.
Which is about 7 years after this first season of Kenobi. His partisans would be in many ways more effective, being more proactive in attacking military targets of the Empire, and were the first to get the hints of the Death Star components like massive kyber crystals. So even though they had a different focus, Saw would likely be aware of the Inquisitors, a group that was extremely intelligent and led by Darth Vader. The Grand Inquisitor was a fallen Jedi himself, being one of the temple guards that escorted Ahsoka to her trial, and he saw how twisted the connection between the Order and the State had become, witnessing how innocent Ahsoka Tano was nearly executed for the crimes of Barriss Offee, a Padawan that bombed the temple, seeing the Jedi as the supporters of evil. Barriss's master, Luminara Unduli, and this temple guard would be Order 66 survivors. It seems that when Vader was hunting down the survivors, he found this temple guard and sensed the darkness growing in him, a shared hatred for the Order that had grown from the Ahsoka trial. It is unclear who captured Luminara, but shortly after being imprisoned at the Spire on Stygian Prime, she was executed in front of the temple guard, who is now in the role of the Emperor's Grand Inquisitor. An incredibly dark ending, her final moments likely filled with insults pointing out her failings as a master, how she was to be executed by the state that the Jedi had created, how she would share the fate of her fallen Padawan, how the Jedi's fates were just moments away from dealing this same fate to Ahsoka. Just to look at the twisted hatred that fueled Vader and his Grand Inquisitor. Then there's Cal Kestis from the Fallen Order game. Considered one of the best Star Wars games in years, and though it would be pure speculation to wonder what he's up to, and of course he could fit in somewhere, especially with the game focusing on battles with the Inquisitors and their hunting down of the Jedi's lists. There was some speculation that this figure with the blaster was Han Solo, but I think his whole disbelief in the Force means he couldn't have been in tough battles with the Inquisitors, and as crazy as this might be for us as viewers to comprehend, in universe, there are countless areas of the galaxy that would have only heard legends of these Force wielders, and there were even those that posed as Jedi or Sith, but like a magician, these Force pushes and pulls were really from some technology. That's likely how people like Han Solo dismissed these myths, and a lot of people were going heavy on the spice. And when I saw this, I instantly thought of Cad Bane's blaster, along with this cloak. I'm a little bit late making this though, as Theory has a whole video pointing this out, and even points out this pic, which does kind of look like Bane, and definitely adds to the idea. Bane also makes a lot of sense for the plot. We need a reason for why Bane would not be working with the Empire by the years post-Yavin. Why all these other hunters work with Vader, but not one of the best. Something I mentioned in his Complete Life video is that it's hinted in the Book of Boba when he tries to convince the people of Tatooine that Fett couldn't be trusted with his history of helping the Empire. How Bane went from the go-to hunter in Bad Batch to either falling out with the Empire or turning his back on them for moral reasons. However it happened has yet to be fleshed out. And with the second Kenobi trailer, we see that this series will play heavily on calling in these hired guns.
I want every lowlife and bounty hunter.
Since this definitely looks like a standoff, I'd say that either the Inquisitors killed one of Bane's bounties, or he is directly competing with them. But who he's working for could be a really interesting question. Maybe Rotta, or some good guys could be working with the best in the biz to capture alive some Jedi or Rebel ally. For sure we will see Forlong, and that means we should see his partner in crime, the illustrious Zuckuss. And I would expect to see the whole gang coming back, even Boba Fett, who was working on growing his group the Krait's Claw since the Clone Wars era. You'll see that Lotzrazi, Embo, Highsinger, and Aura Singh aren't invited to that Vader bounty call. The last we heard of Aura Singh was from Tobias Beckett to Lando Calrissian a year before this show.
You killed Aura Singh.
Pushed her. Pretty sure the fall killed her.
You did the galaxy a favor that day.
But since this is such a surprisingly simple ending, I could see Singh faking her death. The statement seems left open. If they aren't beheaded or exploded, you'll always have to wonder if they'll make a return. Highsinger is alive and working with Vader by around 0 to 1 ABY, so he definitely could be seen. It might make for a funny and crazy battle to watch if IG-88 and him fight for the same bounty. Embo is alive as late as the Battle of Jakku after the fall of the Empire, and nearly caught General Lando Calrissian right after Endor. While Lotzrazi ended up working with Crimson Dawn and later Gracchus the Hutt. So as the heroes are forced further and further into the underworld, the likelihood of running into all these characters mentioned only increases. While on the Imperial side, the Krennic vs Tarkin war to control the Death Star project is in its fiercest moments, with Krennic actually seeming to take the lead, with some major breakthroughs and close friendship with Galen Erso. While Thrawn is also on the rise. At this point, he would be with the Imperial military for 7 years, and every year was growing closer to Palpatine, eventually finding his way into his inner circle. As for the other forces at work, the Thrawn novel shows how tons of different rebellious groups, not yet the Rebel Alliance, would use the weapons and vehicles of the Clone Wars to fight the spread of the Empire. Everything from Republic tanks to reprogramming droid starfighters was used against the new TIEs and to take out the powerful Imperial Star Destroyers. There are even some separatist holdouts, and Admiral Kalani is out there. While there's also the Droid Gotra, a collection of droids, including old battle droids that evaded their version of Order 66 with the decommission on Mustafar. The Droid Gotra is one of those things that keeps being reinforced in new canon. It's part of the rights advocated in the Solo movie, and there's so much building up for a droid rebellion on screen. And while Rex could show up, I think the most impactful and possible would be Cody. If you watched our Complete Life video on him, spoiler for the ending, but it is highly likely that Cody would have been processed into the Dark Trooper project. And since I made that video, there's even more evidence as this cyborg droid unit is being reiterated in canon. So like in Legends, they still went from originally being cyborgs with human parts in them. By placing the battle-hardened lifetime warrior clone brain into a droid body, you had the best of both worlds, even if it was a nightmarish end for a trooper that spent his life fighting against clankers. To become this monstrosity at the end of their life, and to be used to hunt down citizens and Jedi runaways, is one of the saddest fates in all of Star Wars, and Cody would be a prime candidate for this project. The later full droid version of the Dark Trooper project was shown prominently in The Mandalorian, so it isn't as obscure as a Legends reference as Asharad Hett that maybe only a minority of fans would appreciate. It would fill in the lore on a major character from the movies and add backstory to a new droid villain. I really think having a cyborg-slaved Cody chasing down Kenobi, perhaps forcing Kenobi to kill his closest clone brother, would make for one of the most intense scenes in all of new canon. But we'll end with my personal wish, Watto, who in canon was confirmed to have sold Obi-Wan a humidifier sometime during his exile. And sadly, Jar Jar is alive and well far into the time of the New Republic, so be sure to keep an eye out for him. So I hope this all helps you feel like you know who's still around, what you can expect and what you can't, and how all these different organizations are growing and influencing each other. I can't wait to see what Kenobi has in store. Comment what you think down below, leaving a like is the best way to help me out, and subscribe if you want to see more. Special thanks to our supporters over on Patreon, especially our $25 tier supporters Bill Payne, Oscar Jones, and Renee Flores. But most important of all, remember, the good die young and the dark side is powerful, because Jar Jar outlived everyone, and the Force will be with you, always.